Thank you all for coming. You know, the Rebbe really needs no introduction, yet I'm going to anyway. I first started studying formally with Reb Zalman. Adele and I came down from Europa and took a class right after we started the Maggidic journey. He said something interesting in that class and then didn't take credit for it. He said, when we have these eras or times when you have these axial age shifts or epochal shifts, that Hashem sends map makers, people to help us navigate that territory, and then he very humbly pointed to other people. But I knew right away that one of those great compass makers to help us navigate through these times was Reb Zalman, and I really appreciate, I think we all have been touched very much by him and what he's had to offer. I have studied with many great teachers, and I don't think I've ever met somebody who is as thoroughly congruent on every level as a man, as a teacher, as a wisdom keeper, and as somebody heartful.
Also as a shamus, looking around if everything is all right, and no flash, please. Okay.
And from that place, I am so happy to sit with so we can learn more about, as maggidim, how to move forward, as maggidim, how to turn darkness into light, bitterness into the sweet, and learn to await the most sublime beauties. And I'm very glad that Reb Zalman will share his wisdom with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chavale, give her a hug from me. She doesn't take hugs from me, but I always want to give her a hug. Okay. All right, let's sit a little quiet. I'll start with a niggin, and we'll tune into each other, and then we'll see where we go from now on. V'ta'er libeinu, v'ta'er libeinu, v'ta'er libeinu, li'avdecha be'emet, v'ta'er libeinu, v'ta'er libeinu, v'ta'er libeinu, li'avdecha be'emet, leman lo nigal arik, leman lo nigal arik, ve'lo neiled la behala, Oy la behala, leman lo nigal arik, leman lo nigal arik, ve'lo neiled la behala. Mi ze ha'ish Yereh Hashem, mi ze ha'ish Yereh Hashem, yorenu, 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 ba'derech yivchar, oy ba'derech yivchar, mi ze ha'ish Yereh Hashem, mi ze ha'ish Yereh Hashem, yavorenu, yavorenu, yorenu ba'derech yivchar, leman lo nigal arik, leman lo nigal arik, ve'lo neiled la behala, oh la behala, leman lo nigalarik, lo nigalarik, velo nelet la behala. We were going to go and sit downstairs and have the session there. But what can you do when a behala comes in? We had some flooding downstairs. So here we are, and that's a nice room to do some sharing in, so that's wonderful. So you remember no flash? Good. And I want to say Yud-Beit Tammuz is a very special day for me because it was a time when the Rebbe was born, and he was also released from prison from the Bolsheviks when they had sent him off into Siberia, and he was freed on that day. So Lubavitcher Hasidim always celebrate that day, and so I want to invoke the merit of the Rebbe to help you and me in this work of sharing that we're going to do today.
Amen.
I want to say something about why Maggid and what this has to do a little bit with the Rebbe. What's different between a Rav and a Maggid? A Rav, largely, in order to become a Rav, you have to be the person who's an adept and expert in halacha, so that when they ask you a din, you would be able to respond and say, such and such is the din for this and this situation. And for this, you have to really be a baki and a charif. They call them both of these things. Baki means that you have covered a lot of ground and you know where the material is to be found and understand it. And a charif is to be able to take that which you know is a baki and be sharp about it so that you know which aspect of which you are going to apply. A Maggid was there for another reason. He had to go and arouse people to deeper service of Hashem and to tshuva. And so Maggidim would be traveling around, most of the time be speaking of itinerant Maggidim, but there were some cities who would hire people to be Maggidim. Yerushalayim has a Maggid, and Bialystok used to have a Stot Maggid, you know? He was hired by the city to be a Maggid. The Dubner Maggid, although he was in the city of Dubna, he traveled around, and he is the one who is famous for having a good analog, a good mashal for everything. And you may have heard the story about how does he get to have such a good mashal? Do you know that story? Mm-hmm. No? Someone asked him this. For everything you seem to have a good mashal and you preach so well. How do you do that? He said, I'll explain to you with a mashal. Once upon a time there was a sharpshooter. He was very, very good with bow and arrow, and he could always hit the bullseye. No, not always, but most of the time he hit the bullseye, and he was really good. So one day, as he's traveling along on the road, he sees a barn, and on the barn there's some bullseyes, and in every bullseye there's an arrow. Wow, he says, I must meet this person who's such a master of shooting. Whereupon he knocks on the door and he meets the person. He says, may I meet that person who's such a good shot? He says, why? Because all those bullseyes, he says, you don't understand. First I shoot and then I paint the bullseye. So the Maggid was saying, you got to understand that when I look around at people and then I see a mashal comes up, a good analog, a good whatever you want to call it, a mashal, yeah? Then I go ahead and I use that. Now, how does a mashal work? A mashal sets up a gestalt. just as it is with the bullseye and the arrow, where you know which one comes first, right? So you transfer over from the mashal to the nimshal, to that which is analogous to. So now you know the gestalt of this thing goes to that. Many of the stories would begin with once upon a time there was a king, the king had a son, the son misbehaves, the king sent him away in exile. I mean, and then how does he come back, and so on and so forth. That mashal is so old that it's in one of the earliest Gnostic texts that is still extant in Aramaic, where it says, when I was a child, I grew up in my father's home, and everything was very beautiful, and then one day my father had to send me to a strange land, Egypt usually they say, where there was a pearl beyond any price. Remember that word, pearl beyond any price. But it was behind the dragon, and you had to go and get it from there. I went to that country, and I stayed there, and before long I ate of the food that they gave me over there, and I began to think in the thoughts that they were thinking, and I forgot completely about the mission to which my father had sent me. Whereupon my father sent a messenger who brought me food from home, and I remembered what my task was, and I was able to fulfill it with that help. Now, that's so old that Hans Jonas, when he begins his book on Gnosticism, tells that story. So you get the sense that storytelling creates a gate in people's mind. People were sitting and listening to Rabbi Akiva on the Shabbos afternoon. They were falling asleep. So Rabbi Akiva says, you know what? There was a woman. She had 600,000 babies. Everybody reared up, and they start to pay attention to the story. And he says, why is that? Because it was really Yocheved, but she had Moshe Rabbeinu, and if you put Moshe on one side of the scale, 600,000, on the other side of the scale, see? All right. What did he do? He managed to wake people up. My daughter Shalvi once asked me this question. It's a wonderful question. Abba, when you're asleep, you can wake up. When you're awake, can you wake up even more? Mm-hmm. And the point of the Maggid is to go around and wake up people even more. And by using the aesthetic door, which is the same way as they say that the door of tears is never closed, so it is the door of stories is never closed. You can always tell a story. Interesting enough, Elie Wiesel, when he was just coming out of the camps and he lived in France for a while, he still writes in French because that's the language that he really absorbed. So he was a journalist, and Kazantzakis was living in France, and he didn't want to give anybody any interviews. He had met the lady that was a lover of Kazantzakis before, who wanted him to be her amanuensis and write his story. He knocks on the door, and he doesn't want to let him in. He puts a foot in the door and says a word, and he says, so you know her, and he lets him in. And there's an exchange, and later on in Report to Greco, he tells a story like this. Once there was a certain Rabbi Zadig, Z-A-D-I-G, he spells it out, who would tell stories to his people all the time. And his disciples asked him one day the question, why is it that you tell stories like a grandmother? Bobby Mises, you know? And why don't you teach like a certain Reb Zadig, as if saying Reb Zalman, who teaches you all these things pretty straight? He sat for a moment, he says, I'll try and explain it to you with a story. Once it happened that the thistle and the rose were having a conversation. And the thistle was saying to the rose, why is it you have thorns, I have thorns? So why is it that you have roses and I only have thistles? Whereupon the rose said, What is it that you are thinking when you're growing? When I grow, I always think only the rose, the rose, the rose. So the disciples say, so what's that? And why, what does that mean? He says, I don't know either. But when you ask me this question, out pops a story. Now, you see how wonderful it is that stories have that thing. I tell you another story about parables, which is important for you to remember. There is, Kafka wrote this amazing book, a trial. He had all kinds of other things, but in one of them he has a story about a man who sells everything he has to go into the city and to enter into the, quote, the law. When he comes to the law, there's a big gatekeeper, strong, fierce-looking person, and he says, I can't let you in. So he begs him, cajoles him, he stays there all the time, and a long time goes by, he's about to die, that peasant. And he turns to the gatekeeper and says, was there another gate for me to go? Did I go to the wrong gate? No, he says, it's the right gate. And now that you're about to die, I'm going to lock this door. Terrible story, right? So people asked him, what do you mean when you tell these stories? So he says, I'll tell you a parable about parables. He says, two people were talking, and when you talk Jewish things, you call one of them Reuven, the other one Shimon. Reuven is saying to Shimon, he says, tell me, what's the use of your parables? Every time you tell me a parable, go yonder, go yonder. There's no yonder to go to. Leave me alone with the parables. He says, oi, if only you'd get into a parable, all the parables would come true for you. Ha ha, I bet you there's only a parable. He says, you win the bet, but you only win in reality. In parable, you lost. Do I need to repeat that?
Sure.
There is a flip, right? He's saying, I bet you that's only a parable, and he says, you win the bet. It is only a parable. But if you only won in reality, in this reality that you call is your reality, you don't want to leave that reality. But in parable, that world that is called Olam HaMashal, Alam Al-Mithal by Sufis, that world in which there are those archetypes and the stories and all that stuff that is your stock and trade. That world, that person couldn't go into because he wasn't able to make the switch into the enchantment place. What you are trying to do as Maggidim is to lead people to see enchantment in Judaism. And that's the waking up to that reality. And when I start thinking about how disenchanted people are in Judaism today, you get to see why it is really necessary to bring people to that and to bring them to greater enchantment. I want to say two more things and then I'm going to switch with you to another way of exchanging. In the beginning of Hasidism, there were many Maggidim who were traveling around, and they were still traveling with brimstone and fire. So that the story is told how the Baal Shem Tov once came to a town and these people didn't have any rain and they prayed for rain and he prayed with them and rain came and they saved the crop and Shabbos came and they were supposed to have a meal, a Thanksgiving meal, a Su'udat Tohoda'ah. And as they're about to think about doing the Sudas Hoda'ah and they prepare for it, a Maggid comes to town and he asks for permission to speak. So what can you, these are simple people, they can't say to the Maggid no. So the Maggid gets up there and he starts giving them all kinds of tzoras. Remember, these were people who were talking to those who were the survivors of Khmelnytsky's massacres. They're saying, if you don't want that to happen to you again, you have to do tshuva and you have to be very severe and so on and so forth. So he begins with the statement of the rabbis. He says, because 7 kinds of troubles will befall people because of this and that and so on. The people start crying. The Baal Shem Tov has rachmanas on the people hearing that guy speak. From the back of the shul he calls out, why do you give musar to these good people who have prepared a wonderful meal to celebrate the gift that God has given them to have the healing of the environment, to give them the rain and so on. And why do you treat them in this way? You should give musar to God. And started right away to say the Kaddish the Rabbanan and sort of shoved the guy aside, and then they celebrated the meal. So you get the sense that there were Maggidim, and their task was at one time to make sure to tell the people how wrong they were. When the Maggid of Mezritch came to the Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov asked him, and we can go back and forth about the details of the story, the Baal Shem Tov asked him, have you ever studied this section of the Lurianic writings on Kabbalah? And he said, yes. Do you know what it's the meaning? He says, yes, I can recite it by heart. Recited it. The Baal Shem Tov shakes his head like no. And then he says, maybe you want another opinion. There's some minority opinion that does that. He says, no. So he says, okay, so you tell me. So the Baal Shem Tov said, get up on your feet, stand up. And he began to teach that, and everything that was in the book became real in front of their eyes. That's when the Maggid decided he has to become a disciple of the person to whom all the words of the page are realities. That's part of the task that you will have to do. Because everybody can say, I read about it, yes, I got it from Hebrew school, yes, and I'm disenchanted. That's where it usually comes. Mm-hmm. So if you can say, but take a look. What do you think it is like? Moshe Rabbeinu is standing in front of all those people who at this point are rebelling, and they're all thirsty and they want water. And over his mind's eye, there are 40 years of having tangled with those people. 40 shana akud bador v'omer am to'e levavim. 40 years I've troubled with these people. And he sees any moment they're going to get him and Aaron and kill him. And there is so much anger there. And frustration that he takes the staff and hits the rock. He shouldn't have done that. But he does anyway. Now I'll show you an analog to that. This Moshe Rabbeinu sits in the White House. He says no more drilling, and some people say that's not enough, you should do more. And then on the other side, people are saying, what do you mean no more drilling? Some people won't be able to get their jobs. So if he is a mittendrin, and he doesn't lose his cool, oh, how much yashakoyach to send to him. That he should be able to have the koyach okud bador to wrestle with all the people who are pulling at him and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Now, why did I tell you this? Because I wanted you to see that when you take a biblical picture and you put people into a visual and feeling way about it, and then you say, Lama davar domeh, to what can that be likened? And you see that in our day to day, so you right away bring it into where it has to be brought in. And that leads to some action directives or to some attitudinal shifts that have to happen. After the Maggid of Mezritch, there were other Maggidim, the Maggid of Zlotchov, and there was the Maggid of Chernobyl, and there was the Maggid of Kozhenitz, and these people were not traveling. What was it that the Maggid of Mezritch once pointed out? That's a funny story. There were some people who were talking to the Dubner Maggid for years. Why don't you go to Mezritch? This great Rebbe there, and so many of the great people have gone. And so he came to Mezritch and was there for a Shabbos. And the Maggid of Mezritch says, so tell us a little bit of your mashalim. And the whole Shabbos went by with him talking and not hearing, and not listening, and not seeing. Okay? Because he had prepared stuff. And the Maggid had a teaching that went, Im nachon hadavar, if you are giving over teachings that you have already prepared, you have already, like the people have on their guitar, the numbers they're going to sing and play, it's all prepared. Nes tahatoevo hazot b'Yisrael, you have done something abominable in Israel. Why? Because in a sense you're using the audience. You're not serving them. If you can be present to where the people are, and you can allow the group mind to inspire you, and through the group mind the Shechina to speak through your mouth, Shechina medaberet mitoch geruno, you will find that sometimes you will say things that are not what you have prepared, but your sensitivity, if you are there with a full willingness to help the people, and you will find that there are going to be some people who later on will come to you and you are totally unaware of why you had to say what you said and how that fit in like a key to a slot for them and help them shift their situation. So that's the issue of Maggid and why it was so important. Now we come to Maggid in our day. Just as I told you before, that it's important not to always have prepared stuff, now I'm going to talk about the other side, about prepared stuff. Young Amitai, he is the son of Reb Victor and of Nadia, before his bar mitzvah tells me he wants to become a Maggid. So I said, you want to be a junior Maggid? I'll ordain you as a Maggid. But you have to know 100 Hasidic stories to tell before I do that. He steeped himself in that, and he came and then shared the stories. I gave him a real faher, and he had to tell the stories. I have seen him work later on and do things, and I see how that which he has, as it says, V'toratcha betoch me'ai, your teaching is in my guts, that it has a way of coming out in some way to give a vocabulary, to give an image. So that's why I think you need to have a lot of stuff. So the question is, where do you go first? I would say midrash rabbah. If you see where the Chachamim went, what is it that the Chachamim did when they started to make midrash? Whenever there was a bump on the road in the text, there was a word in the text that was a little bit not so why use this word, All of a sudden it says, this is the teaching that Hashem says, gave to them Behar Sinai, at Mount Sinai, and then talks about how the land has to rest for every 7th year. So you can imagine how they said, Ma, Inyan Shmita, Esel Har Sinai. What's the Shmita thing have to do? You see, that moment of asking this kind of a question and not necessarily coming right away with an answer, letting the question hang, the tension in which the question hangs, and then you will see that something is going to fall in and collect with that, and that's how you will get to see what that text has to say. The same way as all the other mitzvahs were given at Sinai, so this one was also given at Sinai, and that's the reason why. No. So, okay. You will find that midrash is going to give you images, and I want you to know you have to filter. Every generation has to filter. This week, I haven't found anything decent anywhere about Bilam. And I think he was a nice guy. When I look at the Chumash itself, without the spin that the Chachamim give, could you imagine, that Billy Graham should say, I'll only say what God puts into my mouth, If Rabbonim would say that, I only will say what God puts in my mouth. How wonderful that would be. So notice that I didn't go necessarily to where the Chachamim went about that. And I want you to know that you have freedom in this way, because you will find among the various midrashim that not all of them will always come out with the same view of things. When I look at Esav in the Chumash, he seems to be a nicer guy than Yaakov. At the beginning, he's a kid, he's running around, he's hunting, he's on his feet. This guy sits at home, come on, get out there already. I could see Mama Rivka getting a little bit upset. So sometimes that which storytelling and all these people have come up with is a new look at the people in the Tanakh, and to learn from them and to bring who you are and what you have. So I'm not saying abandon the midrash. On the contrary, the more midrash you will know, the better you will be. But at the same time, don't feel that you have to be necessarily enslaved. If you get inspiration, and that's why in some way when you're really going to be ready to get the empowerment will be for you to allow inspiration and intuition, the teaching that's going on the inside, intuition, that you will allow that to teach you. And so what will come up, especially when you are with a group of people, I find sometimes when I want to tell stories, that the stories are fighting in my mind, say, tell me, I want to be the one that you tell at this time. So I hope for you to have that problem.
Yeah.
Okay? So that you don't have to grope, where will I find the story, but the stories are going to fight. Vayitrotzitzu ha-stories bekirba. What did I just do? Anybody's willing to explain that?
There were two stories wrestling within.
And how? To what did I connect it?
Rebecca, the two twins in the room.
Okay, you got it. See, you got already 1 star on your certificate. Okay, but do you understand how this works? It just pops up in this way. Okay, I'm now ready for you to raise questions with me, and then we will have the next session tomorrow. We'll deal with a little deeper stuff. This was a hakdama. Yes.
I'll ask a question. So some of the stories that you told today were interesting to me because there was a story within a story within a story.
Yeah.
So could you discuss at all, why the layering within the layering?
I wish I had a story about the story of the story, but it does come up.
Okay.
There, behind you there's a switch, and it might help a little bit for me to see the faces of people. Thank you. Okay. But what you see is that you remember hearing "thereby hangs a tale." You remember that? There is that phrase, "thereby hangs a tale." And sometimes you will see that there are valences between stories that call for that. I can start telling you a story, let's say, about the Baal Shem Tov, or give you an example. I was telling you this, I wanted to get to the story about the parables with Kafka. And I took the detour to tell you about that piece that he has before the law, because somehow when you tell a story, if you can say something about where the story comes from, because they say you should see as if the person, the Baal Hashmua, stands before you. So that's one side. The other side, whenever I would check with Reb Shlomo when he would tell a story, Reb Shlomo Zochin Levoche, and I would then go to the book from where he has the story, and the story wasn't like he told it. The story was much drier, it was much, more condensed. So what did he do? He read those stories and he played the movie in his head. Now, if you take a story about Kafka and you play the movie of Kafka in his head, then the connection between Kafka and Yeri Langa starts coming up. And Kafka has a story about a man who woke up one day and he was like a cockroach, called the Metamorphosis. And where did he get the idea about the Metamorphosis? Because one of his friends of his youth went to Belz and became a chassid, and came back scrawny and stayed in the last room of the house and cooked for himself a little kasha and so on and so forth. So he was the cockroach of the family, which he then described. Do you see what I'm saying? Now look what I've done by telling you about more and more. The picture gets larger. You'll also have to watch out not to make it too large. Okay, anyone else? Tell about your motivation. Why do you want to do that?
Can't now
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
No, that's not a good answer. I know that you're, in a sense, you're being deployed. And I accept that, okay? But that's not how it constellates itself in you. Because you have a picture how you would do that. How do you see yourself? In what circumstance do you see yourself?
I see my Maggid as utilizing integral theory and thought. And part of my work is to take Judaism from an integral model and infuse that into my Maggid.
Good. And now comes the next question. Imagine you're now standing in front of a group. Tell me what kind of a group it is, how did you get to be invited there, and so on.
It might be a chavara that is inviting me. And if they're amenable to integral thought, I would start explaining the basic principles. I wouldn't give an extraordinarily long explanation, but I would touch on the high points. And I've done this before with integral Torah. And I would use the elements of integral thought and apply them to the particular story that I was teaching. So I would look at it from the lower left and the lower right, and the upper left and the upper right. And that way I would have a holistic model of what a Maggidic tale is.
You understand the question I asked before, how do you see yourself and why, and so on.
Can we finish?
I see myself, the practice that I'm involved with is bringing experiential activities and practices to engage and awake people in thinking about spirit and asking the question. I do that through drumming as prayer. We call it the Shaviti drum circle, where we have a drum circle that engages, tries to create a confluence of Nefesh, Olam, and Shana, which is our Shvitis and chanting engage us in the Nefesh, and our circle is our Olam, and everyone's voice is there. And when we're drumming in the moment, in time, and not conscious of time, we are engaged in Shana, hopefully. And hopefully having fun, and with the chants that we do, it's really interesting. We have a regular group, but when we go out into the larger community with people who are not engaged in this kind of thing every day, it's totally amazing the reaction at how alive it is. And and the other practice I do is with dance, using dancing Sefirot, and dancing the energies and the rhythms of Sefirot as kind of as a map. And I kind of try and explain Sefirot and then tell people, don't worry about it. It's about the dance, and just allowing the music to move your body in the different rhythms that correspond to different Sephirotic archetypes.
That's wonderful, because I've been for years asking people that when Simchat Torah comes, that the Hakafot,
That's what we do.
right, should be according to the Spirit. Yashikoah.
That's what we do.
What stories do you, where do you tell stories and do, what I hear right now, you're doing drumming that goes with music, and you're doing dance, and where do you do the teaching, the Torah story?
It kind of just falls into place from as needed. I usually in holiday events, I give some basically stories about, I don't know if they're midrashic stories, but they're basically other ways to look at the ritual and understand the ritual in a non-literal way.
I'm happy with what you're saying, so I'm not trying to schlep you this way. And obviously, when you create the set for people to do that, you will do that with some teaching and with some story. And how would you get venues in which venues would you like to do that?
Well, with the Mitzvah Jewish community, which I'm a part of and help build in Chicago, is kind of like our platform, and we have been involved with Limud Chicago, and the Jewish Folk Fest. We did the Lag BaOmer with a conservative youth group up in the suburbs. They invited us to do a bonfire drum circle.
Wonderful. So I just want to say, don't be timid. Let people know. There's a Sentinel or whatever it's called in Chicago. There's a Jewish paper or something like that. Talk to someone to write it. They're always hungry for print, especially if you have something with pictures and so on and so forth. So that, because the issue is we have to come out and do our stuff in the world. Who else would like to tell me a little bit about their? Yes.
I have an alter ego named Eve.
Yeah.
Who comes out, and her relationship is very integral to studying, and I I feel like she definitely is a gate. She definitely opens the door for different kinds of understanding because she represents the people in a way. And at the same time, she represents the feminine aspect of what we listen to. And she also has a way of describing things in simplistic terms, very simply, very sort of day to day. And she plays on words a lot. She plays with words all the time, so that we see that the people listening or the audience gets to play with the words with her. And so I really feel like she's essential. I feel like she is an essential being for all of us because she's the even all of us.
That's wonderful. I love the way in which puns create. A lot of midrash is based on puns.
Yes.
So if you're going to do that, that's wonderful. And how do you publicize what you're doing?
You know, that for me, that's the most difficult task, because even though she exists, I do not know how to publicize her, because she is so intimate in integral in intensives. And even though I have told my own chavara at home that she exists, and they said, oh yeah, she can do an evening, never open to it. So it's actually not so easy to bring her out.
So I want to make a couple of suggestions here. That's really what's important. The people who know you, you're ein navi be'iro. And the people won't really open up so easily to that. Also, an alter ego is also a way of, how would I say, like Charlie McCarthy, who sits there on the marionette, you know.
Yes.
And he can also be a little tough on people because he can call people's shtick in this way.
And Eve does.
Huh?
Eve does.
Well, that's wonderful. So that's important. So the question is again how to bring this out. And I would say, if you can get some friendly people to do Eve with, and to put it on YouTube,
Why not?
I think that would be very important, because then along with that you can have a shtickler website and let people know that you're available to do that. That's number one. Number two, I'm so good at some things and I'm so bad at others. If it were up to me alone, I wouldn't have had a single book that I published. And Baruch Hashem, I've published a number of books. And that is because, thank God, I was able to find somebody who is good at that stuff that I'm not good at, and who is willing to work in collaboration with me. There must be some people who are going to be the Adam to your Eve, and who are going to be willing to speak up in places and because you do need some hustling. If you don't, it doesn't get out. And I want to say this is my j'accuse, my accusation to Jewish Renewal people in general and to more liberal Jews, that they're not active enough in proselytizing for evangelizing, proselytizing for our situation. And so the more possibilities you create, the better it would be. In the beginning, when Reb Shlomo and I started to work on these things, we would do freebies for people. Thank God you don't have to do that anymore the same way as we did. But to some extent you may have to. Also, and there are some things that come as tzedakah. Homes for the aged. People are so bored there. And if you come in and you do that, and chavra itle, you know, one person tells the other, and the word gets around. We had this wonderful visitor here. If you have them at your congregation, Okay. What the storytelling people have done is that they have made sure that they should have stuff like this on the Parshiot of the week, and you may come up with something like that. And where are you located?
In Santa Fe.
Ah, Santa Fe, you don't have too many shuls. So you'll have to let them know in Albuquerque, and you'll have to let them know in other cities.
Berkeley, Boston, those are my connections.
I think that's really important, yes.
Yeah.
So people should know, because, you know, the program people in various congregations are also hungry for new talent and stuff like that. The other thing I want to suggest to all of you is to put some money together and to talk to Rachel Masliach. She is the lady in the Hadassah magazine. To interview several of you and then buy an ad in Moment or in Hadassah that says, if you want such and such people to come and design it in a good way with a clearing possibility, you know, one of you who doesn't have any other work could be the clearing person, and whatever comes in as parnassah, you can get a certain percentage for setting them up, and that would be necessary. You'll have to get a Maggidic guild together to do that right. Anyone else?
So I've always felt a bit like an outlier here, which is clearly why I'm standing right by the door. I feel that I approach Maggid to whatever extent I can be said to practice it, sort of from the back door. My obsession is building residential community, so that Jews will have the experience of living with each other again, which outside of their birth families, which we tend not to do in this country anymore. And I found that in the process of all of these different people from different directions colliding with each other, Maggidut occurs, but it's incidental to our goals.
So I want to say that V'yasu kula maguda echaz laset retzoncha v'levav shalem, that we should make a resident community. One of the earliest pieces that I published was about Qumran, USA, to create a urban monastic kibbutz for people. There have been all kinds of chavurot and people who have tried to do that together. And usually what they're doing is they're beginning to do this with their head. And when they start doing it with the head, it never comes together. It comes together when people take a project to do with their hands. I remember when the Chavurat Shalom started in 68, 69 in Cambridge, there were such brilliant people there. They were all refugees from seminaries and from academic places. And they have been through Ramah camps and stuff like that. And at the same time, there wasn't anyone who would know how to fix, put a fuse in where it is necessary or something like this. When it comes to composting and stuff like that, they weren't around. They wanted it, but it's like saying everybody wants to be a rudder, nobody wants to be a sail. So it's going to be important for you to find the people who work together. And when I look at what our Adama people are doing, it is so beautiful. And more power to you. I really wish for that to happen. I want to see this Olamecha Tira B'chayecha, that there should be a commitment group to really live together with Ava Ve'achva Shalom Ve'reut and be able to overcome all the ego shtick that get in the way. Say Amen. Okay. Anyone else? Please.
I wrote a book. That was actually, the baby was just delivered today at 1:30. And so, thank you. This group has been a wonderful support all this time. And it's a book that it's actually going to be for everybody, for lay people as well as professionals. I'm a psychologist.
And the content of the book is?
It's a psychology, improvement, spirituality, psychology.
Give them the title.
It's called Lasting Transformation.
Say it again.
Lasting transformation.
Lasting.
Transformation.
Good, wonderful.
So it's the first half is all about our life lessons, learning how to deal with the mind, transforming soul holes into whole souls. And then the second half is all about soul wisdom.
It is wonderful. Yehi Ratzon, you should have lots of reader people, and that they should take the lessons to heart. And if you are, besides writing, how would you like to use your Maggidut?
Well, I mean, now I see it actually really being utilized because I'm going to be speaking to a lot of people because of the book, and I think stories is such a way of, opening people's hearts and souls.
Good. So the trips you have to, I hope you have a good publicist to set you up, but that's what I mean, the other person who can help, and then you go from place to place, and you do that, and you may be able to find some people in local places who will say, we'll make a group that will work on your book.
Okay.
I think you should encourage that.
And I do retreats.
Good, so you might come and do a weekend with those folks, and then they should work together. How did it happen? I came for a weekend to people, and that became the Aquarium Minion of Berkeley, and they stayed together, right? Anyone else?
Hi. So I'm also a writer. I've written 2 books. One Crazy Jew was my first book, and my second book was a poetic retelling of the Book of Genesis. And I'm now working on a graphic novel called Shake Banana and the Obama Mamas. And it's sort of it's got about 5 different stories going on, so I am a little concerned about having too many stories at once. But one aspect of the story is the reclaiming of the feminine wisdom, and that's the Obama Mamas. A second part of the story is sort of a fictional relationship between me and Barack Obama, based on I was in law school with him, but I didn't know him. But it's sort of based on a pretend knowing him. And then the third one is a retelling of the Book of Exodus from the perspective of a group of sort of alternative people down below. And so that's in the process. It's on my lap right now. And then I also lead rock and soul services for my temple in Chicago.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But I think with everything I do, the publicity and the getting it out there is a challenge, and I certainly agree that we're not very good at that. And people who come to the services love it, but most people don't know it exists.
That's right. That's really the big issue. I just want to say, don't worry about the 5 stories. Watch someone making challah.
My daughter.
Our daughter.
Our daughter.
When you watch them make challah, you see that the strands are still strands, but now they're going under, then they come over. It'll be good. Yehi Ratzon that the right malachim should help you. I don't know people in Chicago anymore, but Herman Schalman is still around, somewhere in the north side. It would be kedai to talk to some of those older war horses that are there and give him my regards and say, any suggestions?
I'm Shlomo Herman.
Yeah. Arnie Wolf is gone. Arnie Wolf is already making trouble upstairs. Yes. But there is a young man who has taken over there in the KAM temple, who is a nice person who has a chush in what you have to offer. All right, I think we are running to an end, yes?
It's up to you.
Okay.
Well, let's take another 10 minutes, but not more than that, okay? Anyone else who would like to speak? Yes.
Hi, Reb Zalman. My husband Steve and I and the kids were here 4 years ago. It was a blessing. At that time, Steve, who's not with us right now, talked to you about his interest in writing a book about the 23rd Psalm.
Yeah.
He's not moved much farther, but my prayer is that he will, because I really would love to be with him on the road. He has the mind part, and I'm really good at making a container and helping people to, sing a little, get the heart part going. So I don't know if there's any message I can give him from you about doing it.
I want to give him a message right quick. First of all, it shouldn't be the 23rd Psalm. People pick this one up. When I did the translation of it, I would have to do it with the apologies to King James. Because they're so stuck in that form of the translation, they don't understand it. There are other wonderful psalms, and I suggest 139. Whither shall I flee from thy presence, O Lord? If I ascend to heaven, thou art there. That's a wonderful, wonderful psalm. Then he should get as many translations of that available to him, and also in other languages. Which other languages does he read in? None? All right, then as many other translations, because I have found that at times when I was reading it in another language, I got a flavor that I didn't get. For instance, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I never really did much. I said it, never paid attention, until I opened up the Vulgate, the Latin translation, and found where it says, Virga tua et baculus tuus, mea ipso confonant sunt. And I got to realize that it's talking about thy whip and thy crutch. They comfort me. Do you see? The rod and the staff, that when you pay attention to the question comes up, how does the whip comfort me? That's something to think about. Yes, Chavola.
Now I want to intrude.
Please.
Do I have your permission?
Yes.
It's your
Yes.
permission, I mean. How old is your son?
My son?
Who is it who's
Oh, my husband.
What's
My
your
husband.
husband?
My husband.
Sorry, I misheard.
It's okay.
Do you think he would take the details of those suggestions better from Reb Zalman than from you? If so, you might suggest that he email Reb Zalman and he can get all this information directly.
Good. Okay, good.
If you have Skype, it's even better. Then we'll see each other, okay? All right. Good. Anyone else, please?
So,
Your name, please.
My name
I
is
forgot to ask
Smedar.
you.
Yeah, Smedar Maggid.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
from Fort Collins. And I'm actually I'm a guest with the Maggidic group. I recently completed Lev Shomer,
Yeah.
Latrim. And so the things that I see that I want to do are different. I'm not
Yeah.
a Maggid, I'm a Mashpi'ah. But I think what I see, my niche or the places where I can go is kind of bridging people who are very grounded and left-brained, but have a yearning and have a desire to go, because that's where I come from. My background is as a scientist, my education is a scientist. And so I've come to this through my own yearning and my own seeking. And I'm also not very good at the marketing piece.
So, if you're good, I keep saying today, the Chabad people aren't Chabad anymore. They're Nehi. They're Netzach Hod Yesod, really, because that's where they're, and they're always into the activity. You want the Chabad should also know from Chagas, that it should know about Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferet. And that's an important thing. Just keep in mind the imagination. People are, when you say go into feeling directly,
Right.
they will put up
Close
all
up.
kinds of shields. But if you say, open your imagination, su'u sharim roshechem, allow your imagination to open up, and ask yourself, what would a day be like if you were to live it according to your dreams? And the likelihood is some more of the right brain stuff will start showing up. Yeah. Anyone else? Please.
I'm just kind of a guest here, but I just wanted to share an idea with the hope that maybe it will stimulate other people to think of imaginative things. So I went to Limud a few weeks ago, and I wanted to do a proposal for some unique activity, and then I just had to sit with myself and say, oh, what do I love? I love teaching and I love movies. How do I put together? So I don't know if I got accepted yet, but my thought was to take dramatic scenes from teacher films and put them together and have a discussion with people and show how even in the secular Hollywood world, so many inspirational ideas are based on Jewish themes. So that's what's percolating within me right now. So.
How wonderful. When I came first in '56 to Winnipeg, I used to put together all kinds of, they had the 45, remember the 45s? Mm-hmm. And I would take from the 45s all kinds of things like, cross over the bridge, cross over the bridge. And I was crying in the chapel and so on. So I would give a talk about God in Tin Pan Alley. And you're trying to do something like this about Hollywood. Yeah. Abroche, all of you are masking that the proposal be accepted, that it should have lots of money connected with it, and the right kind of technical people who prepare all the film clips for you. Say,
Amen.
Amen.
all right.
Higher education.
All right, one more and then I send you off. You have a right, you make the seal.
I would say I feel very firmly on my Maggidic path. I feel like here in Boulder, I'm acting my hopes and dreams. And there's something that you said, because another thing I do, another Maggidic act I do is in organizing and supporting people to live their Maggidic dream. And this idea of a guild is very exciting to me. It's not so easy because, hard to believe, but everybody has their idea, as you were sharing with Joel. And to get that true collaboration where people collaborate as opposed to clinging and grasping to their idea of it is difficult. And as I have this sense of a guild and looking at the various Maggidic schools as I see it now, I'm ready to play, and I'm wondering if you can share any ideas of how to create that collaborative effort.
Oh, if I were good at that, you would see how Jewish Renewal would outpace the Kabbalah research.
Fair enough.
I can't give you, but if I start to think new, maybe Epis, where's inspiration, something come. Give me a moment. Most of you, when you talk to each other from the creative place. And I think that won't work. You have to, sometimes im kebanim, im keavadim. Sometimes you are like children, and you have to be loved, and you have to be honored and given your way and so on. Sometimes you have to be seen keavadim. If there are some people who are willing to see themselves keavadim, gather those and start with them. People who say, this is practical, this is specific. Chavali, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that you are a new group of people trying something new. And if you try to organize it as other things you know have been organized, you'll be cramming it into the wrong shape. So what I would suggest is getting volunteers who agree to program to dream on it a certain night a week and simply share what they come up with for 3 months.
Maggidic, that's very Maggidic. Yes. All right. I can't let you go without a word. Go on.
Thank you. My name's Charlie. I came to the Maggidic program by accident, by wanting to meet the teacher because I had seen him on television. I didn't know about Renewal Judaism. I was terrified the first 2 days. The lady you give a lot of credit, I give credit for keeping me there. So fast forward, I've been through the Lev Shomea program. I'm still not actively in Maggidut, but I suddenly find myself realizing I've been a storyteller all my life. Mostly jokes, but not always. And now I'm looking for a path. My priority is service. I want storytelling to do good in the world. I'm not sure how that happens.
We don't have easy situations as they had at one point. When the Baal Shem Tov went to the central well in the town of Yankee Israel, of the Bala told us, and Polnoy. He was standing near that well and started to tell stories, and people gathered around him. I would like to suggest that if you have jokes and so on and so forth, and first of all, before you leave, you have to tell us one joke. So I'm giving you a warning right now. But I think that there are enough stand-up places. And I don't know where you live. Where do you live?
Queens, New York.
Wow. I think it would be such a wonderful thing if you were to talk to the people at Klau and, to Irvin Kula and to some other people, 92nd Street Y, something like this, to make it an open mic evening, and you should be the MC for that, do your own thing and bring somebody else in to warm up for you or something like this.
I know.
I think that would work.
Shrum for this. Penina Shrum.
Oh yes, Panina. I know Panina.
Where?
Oh, Panina.
New York, 92nd Street Y.
Ah,
Okay,
thank you.
the joke.
When I was at Eilat Chaim for Shavuot, Reb David told people about coming to his synagogue. He said we can arrange home hospitality, but I can't help you with parking. So I turned to my friend Jean-Loup and I said, I know a story about parking. There was a man who needed a parking space. He was desperate. He had to be at a certain office for a really important reason. There was no parking. He got so desperate, having no real religious inclination in his life till this moment, he said, God, if you find me a parking space, I will change my life. And that moment he looks down the street and he sees somebody getting into a car and he says, never mind, God, I found one.
Yashikar, a point well made. All right. מי שברך אבותינו אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, הוא יברך את כל הקהל הקדוש הזה. וימלא משאלות ליבם לטובה. להיות מגידי ישרים בין עמך ישראל ובין האומות. בשכר זה הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמרם ויצלם מכל צרה וצוקה נגע ומחלה וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעש ידיהם כל ישראל אחיהם ואחיותיהם ונאמר אמן. אמן. רבי חנניה בן הקשה אמר רוצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכר ישראל לפי כך ירבה להם תורה מצווה שנאמר אדוני חפץ למען צדקם יגדיל תורה ויאדיר קדיש דרבנן ברוך יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה ועולמא דברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי ויצמח פורקוני ויקריב משיחי בחי יכון ויומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה וזמן קריב ואמרה אמן יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשא בריחו לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעולמה ואמרו אמן על ישראל ועל רבנן ועל תלמידיהן ועל המגידים ועל המשפיעים וכל מן שעוסקים בצורכי ציבור של אמונו. יהי להון ולכון שלום הרבה, חינה וחיזדה וחיים מריחין ומזון הרוויחה, ופרקונו מן קודם אבוין ושמיה ואימו אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמי וחיים טוב מלינו ועל כל ישראל ואימו אמן. ועושה שלום ממומה ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואימרו אמן. Put chairs back where they belong. You come with me for a
Are
moment.
they not coming back tomorrow morning?
Yes,
Leave the chairs where they are.
leave the chairs where they are. Oh, is it good to have a smart wife. Abrocha in your capital, sweetie. Okay, you come with me and you come with me for a moment.